We're going to spend some time doing a deep dive into the Clippers versus the Mavs series. This is the one series that is actually set in stone at this point. They've played 3 times this year, and the Clippers have won 2 of them, but they have not played since the calendar turned over. So they had 1 game in December, 2 games in November. The Mavs beat the shit out of them during that 6-game losing streak uh, um, when they had just made the James Harden trade. Then they played again shortly after that, and the Clippers kind of handled them and really locked up Luka, and they struggled. And then the Clippers won a game in December where Kyrie did not play. So that's more or less what we're working with here. So we have no evidence of what it looks like with PJ Washington and Daniel Gafford. We have no evidence of what it looks like with the good Mavs versus the good version of the Clippers. A lot of this is going to be basically hypothetical. But I want to go through both ends of the floor. I want to start with Clippers on offense, and let's just kind of bounce around here. Who's going to guard Kawhi to start this series? Let's start with you, Logan.
Ooh, I guess I'm sticking PJ or Derrick Jones Jr. You got to have somebody. I like PJ. I'd probably stick PJ on Kawhi.
What about you, Carson?
Yeah, I agree. I think that PJ, you probably want, I mean, both of him and Derrick Jones Jr. have good size and good length, but PJ is just bigger, longer, and stronger. And I think Kawhi is so physical that like he's in a pretty good mold to match up with him.
Mm-hmm. So they started Grant Williams on PJ Washington last time, or excuse me, on Kawhi Leonard in the regular season this year. Obviously, that's going to be PJ Washington in the starting configuration. My guess is the starting configuration will be PJ Washington on Kawhi and then Derrick Jones Jr. on Paul George. Derrick Jones Jr. guarded Paul George in a lot of their matchups this particular season. I prefer Derrick Jones on guards. Personally, I like when he uses his length and quickness. He struggles a little bit against the bigger forwards that he goes against. But this is kind of the predicament that Dallas is in with this particular matchup is like if you put Derrick Jones on Paul George, then you have to put most likely Kyrie Irving onto James Harden. And that's, a matchup that James Harden is going to feel more comfortable in than he would in some other matchups. And so that's where it gets tricky for me is like, is there a version of this where the Mavs lean heavily into Maxey at the 5 and then have Maxey on Kawhi and then try to put PJ Washington on Paul George so that they can put Derrick Jones on James Harden. But that like the matchups are a little bit tricky for Dallas in this one. So I'm gonna bounce this around to you guys, and we'll go to you first, Carson. Like, how would you just match up in both the starting 5 and in your ideal kind of configuration against the Clippers if you're Dallas?
So I think that you talk about an interesting counter there. And historically, we've seen a bunch of like mixing and matching and small ball in these Dallas Clippers series. It's been super fun. Like we saw the Clippers go 5 out because Luka was toasting Zubats every time that he got a switch. And then the Mavs played Boban like legit minutes to try to counter that. So I expect there to be some of that. I also think the Clippers can't go small how they used to because they don't have Batum. And I like what you're talking about in terms of Maxey matching up with Kawhi, not having a weak perimeter defender on James Harden. My concern at that point is just like how you deal with Zubats, because I think he is the level of interior finisher and mismatch attacker. I want to say he's like a 90th percentile post scorer this year, and he doesn't miss those hook and touch shots. He is like the closest to Jokic in terms of efficiency from that range. And in fact, I think this year it's much lower volume, obviously, but he's making like 66%. So I just worry about if he plays those small ball looks off the floor to where they're not tenable for Dallas, because they're going to have to try to match up physically. And I think that they can with an actual 5 out there like Gafford, but I'm not sure that they can survive the small ball looks here.
I wouldn't play Kleber at all. I'm not a Kleber guy. I also just think that having the weapon of Gafford and Lively on the court at all times is really valuable. I want to ask though, so what are we doing with Luka in this hypothetical? Like, who are we?
I think he's
him
guarding
on?
Terrence Mann in all likelihood. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm going to be honest with you guys. I'm completely disregarding James Harden. I don't care who I put on him. I'm expecting him to brick everything.
Dude.
I'm going I'm going PJ on Kawhi. I'm going Derrick Jones Jr. on PG. PG also didn't have a great, again, small sample size, 3 games. PG was 17 points on, 39-25 splits. Again, that's a bad stretch of the season, so it's hard to really gauge if that was a matchup thing or just, a bad stretch from him. But I think I'm comfortable with that. PJ on Kawhi, Derrick Jones Jr. on PG. And yeah, I don't know, man. I'm not a big Kleba guy. I
He's
would
guarded Kawhi
play
well,
him.
dude, over the years.
Yeah, I'm very much a Kleba guy.
He's
Put me in team Kleba guy over here.
Yeah, I don't know Rogan's deal with Maxi Kleber, man. I mean, he's handled those big physical wings. He's like built to guard Kawhi. That's like the one player in the league who like
I have a stat for
best
you,
suited to
Logan.
guard.
I have a stat for you, Logan. So the reason why I actually talked about this a lot in my film session yesterday, but I love the PJ Washington, Maxi Kleber playing together in the front court configuration. Those two guys have played 435 possessions together, and they're plus 19 net rating, and they have a 100 defensive rating with that group. They only give up an offensive rebound on 22.3% of misses. So that's what, a 77.7% defensive rebound percentage, which is incredible. The to me, like when I look at the starting configuration, because they're going to start Gafford, right? And so it'll be Gafford versus Zubac. And like Carson, you hinted at this, and I'm 100% with you. This is a Zubac series in so many different ways. Because like if Zubac is on the floor and playing well, Dallas will have to size up to deal with him. If Gafford is on the floor, or Lively, whoever it is that they have at the 5 spot, that puts you in a predicament with the other 3 guys, because you need Luka to not be guarding James Harden, Kawhi Leonard, or Paul George, right? That's going to put a lot of pressure on Kyrie Irving to be very good defensively in the series. Now, for the record, I think Kyrie Irving is a guy that, like, in the aggregate is an average to below average defensive player, but when he does his job, he has the tools to be an impactful defensive player. And we've seen, I even thought he was very good defensively in the 2016 finals for the most part. So like he has that in him, obviously a much younger version of him, but like that's going to be the big swing factor. If Dallas can do enough damage to Zubac that the Clippers end up going small, that's where I look at or if Kleba can somehow hang with Zubac enough and they can get to that PJ Washington Kleba front court. That to me is the scariest version of this team. If you can get Luka and Kyrie out there with Derrick Jones and PJ Washington and Maxi Kleber, I'm putting Kleber on Kawhi. I'm putting PJ Washington on Paul George. I'm putting Derrick Jones Jr. on James Harden, and I'm hedging and recovering every action with Kyrie Irving and Luka Doncic in it. And I actually like the Mavs' chances in that configuration. I definitely think small ball heavily favors Dallas in this matchup.
Absolutely.
Do you guys agree?
1000%. And obviously the regular season matchups this year were weird, but we did see, like, in the game that Dallas won convincingly, a pretty extended stretch of Clippers small ball, and it just doesn't work the same with PJ Tucker. Like, I think they're conceding too much size, and they're just not as athletic as they used to be. Like, all of these guys have lost some athleticism to where they used to be able to hang defensively much more. But I totally agree. I think Luka is going to be an absolute problem no matter what the Clippers do. But I think they're probably at their best defensively, like starting with Zoo in drop and Kawhi on Luka. And then I think they're going to have to mix in like a heavy deal of trapping and just say, okay, Derrick Jones Jr., PJ Washington, like, knock down your spot up jumpers off this 4-on-3, because we just can't let Luka murder us in single coverage. Sorry, I moved to Dallas offense, but I was just thinking about the various
it's time to head there anyway.
permutations with the getting Zoo off the floor. I think the Clippers really want Zoo on the floor in this. I think his physicality, his rebounding, his interior defense, and his just overall finishing offensively, it is something that they kind of need. If they go small, I just think Dallas has more pop, and their small ball is also bigger than the Clippers.
It just is. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I just think Luka is just such a problem no matter what lineup you throw at him. I mean, you can go back and watch like the games between these two teams. LA threw everybody at him. If it was Kawhi, if it was PJ, if it was Zoo, if it was Terrence Mann, I don't really know if it matters. Like, to me, the high pick and roll action with Luka is just so hard to stop every possession down. Yeah, I don't know if it matters. And I think Carson made a good point. Like, if the Clippers had Batum, I think that's a real difference maker and like just another look that you can throw at them. PJ Tucker is, I mean, can he guard anybody at this age? Like, I know that
He's a
PJ
dog.
is,
He's a bulldog.
I mean, he's a dog, but it's like, they tried to put him on Luka and Luka just abused him. I mean, the Luka abuses everybody, but PJ couldn't hold him. I think I think every lineup configuration is a problem for LA, man. Luka is just a nightmare to deal with, man. I don't think there's a solution.
I don't think I don't think the Clippers are going to be able to do much switching against Luka, because I think Luka is going to feel comfortable against every single Clipper that's not named Kawhi.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the way I expect them to start the series, I expect them to start with Terrence Mann on Luka, and I expect them to start with Paul George on Kyrie, and I expect them to start with Kawhi on PJ Washington and help. That's just based on some of the stuff that I saw from the regular season matchups this year. However, this will eventually tilt towards Kawhi on Luka.
Mm-hmm.
That's what happened in the previous iterations of this matchup in the postseason. That was what turned it around last time when Luka had them on the ropes. It was Kawhi went on Luka and was able to kind of change the dynamic of the series. What I think about happening, and where I think this is inevitably heading, as I mentioned, I think Kawhi on Luka will force Luka to call up ball screens.
Mm-hmm.
So Luka has this tendency of being like, oh, I don't want to deal with the traps, so I'm just going to take my guy in straight ISO. And obviously a hard double in a straight ISO situation compromises the defense more than a hard double in a ball screen, because a hard double in a ball screen, the screener's in a little bit of a disadvantageous position as he's trying to disengage and get the basketball. Mm-hmm. Whereas in a double team and an ISO, you can just flash and there's usually an opening that you can capitalize on. So from there, kind of looking back at the Warriors game when they beat the Mavs, what was that, a week ago? Like, Andrew Wiggins actually makes Luka a little uncomfortable. And specifically, he doesn't even feel comfortable getting to his pull-up three. So what that did is that made Luka call ball screens consistently, which allowed Golden State to trap, which then got them in rotation. And they're not as good at the 4-on-3s as some of the other teams in the league. They'll get the ball to the corners, but it's like it's PJ Washington shooting a corner three. It's a Derrick Jones Jr. corner three. It's a Maxi Kleber corner three. It's that sort of thing. And they can miss those shots. Now, as I've said before about the Mavs, I think that dynamic still favors Dallas in the sense that it's worth it to have PJ Washington and Maxi Kleber as defenders in what they can do. Like, it's worth it to have the two-way ceiling that the Mavs have. But my guess is that eventually over the course of the series, Kawhi will end up on Luka, and then Luka will call for ball screens to attempt to get Kawhi off of him, which will lead to a heavy trapping and rotating kind of situation. I actually think both teams are going to make each other uncomfortable for extended stretches. I think when the Mavs go small and they put Kleber, Washington, and Derrick Jones on the big three, they'll be able to slow down the Clippers for stretches. And I think the Clippers are going to be able to slow down the Mavs for stretches by putting Kawhi on Luka Doncic and trapping. Kyrie obviously is going to have advantages, but Kyrie's not the type of force that Luka is in terms of like being truly unguardable in terms of specific types of matchups. So I do think that's the direction this is heading. And that's what kind of keeps me thinking this is going to be a very long series. Like, I would say this, if Kawhi was healthy, and I mean like obviously healthy and ramped up for this, I'd call this a 7-game series. But with Kawhi's question marks and him probably being a little out of rhythm when he enters into this series, I kind of lean towards Dallas in 6. So let's start with you, Carson. What's your prediction for how this series is going to go?
I'm going to take Dallas in 6 as well. And just one more fun stat real quick on the trapping, because I do think that's going to be important for the Clippers. Over the last 4 years before this season, 3 out of those 4 years, the Mavs were a more efficient offense out of pick and roll when teams trap Luka. This year, and sample size is a factor with all this, but they've been significantly less efficient. They average like 0.89 points per possession, which really isn't good. And I think the biggest factor is just that the spot up shooting isn't as good. And you mentioned it's like if PJ Washington goes 25% in a series from deep, if Derrick Jones Jr. goes 25%, like you just wouldn't be surprised. So I think forcing the ball out of Luka's hands just with the level he's at. And I do think they have to have Kawhi on him when it matters most. But ultimately, I just love what I've been seeing from this Dallas team. I think the offensive level that they've been at is ridiculous. I think that they have much more consistently shown defensive engagement as of late, and it's the playoffs, so it's going to be a different beast. I think we get a better version of the Clippers defense definitely than we have, but I do think they match up physically and athletically in the front court and on the glass much better than they have in recent years. So with my concerns about Harden, with not fully knowing about Kawhi's health, and with the fact that Luka, again, like you can trap and you can do that in stretches, but I still think even if it comes down to him resorting to attacking you in ISO, especially anybody other than Kawhi, like he's just at that special level offensively right now where it feels like he can basically get you good shots almost no matter what. And Kyrie has been so dynamic offensively. I'm just really, really optimistic about Dallas, but I do think the Clippers are really good. And I think this is going to be a hell of a series, but I would take the Mavs in 6.
Really quickly before you go, Logan, that was funny. Carson referred to them as the Lippers.
Oh, well, you know, a lot of lip service coming out of LA. James Harden, I am the system.
So to Carson's point, I was just pulling up the numbers. When the Mavs shot out of pick and roll this year, they were a 90th percentile efficiency team. When they got a shot out of a trap in pick and roll this year, they were 33rd percentile in efficiency. And they were looks like about 0.7 of a point worse on a per possession basis. So yeah, like and by the way, we're still picking the Mavs. I'm just saying like it is tilted in the sense that it used to be like, for instance, Golden State, like they, in the 2022 series, they were staying home and trying to force Luka to score because, especially with the Wiggins matchup, it just was a tough one for him. But they were so good shooting off the ball. They just had so much off ball shooting. And this team is just more geared towards defensive personnel. And yeah, like the best way to guard this Dallas Mavericks team is to get the ball out of Luka's hands and try to make someone else shoot, which is typically not the way you want to deal with that type of matchup. All right, Logan, what's your pick for this series?
Yeah, I mean, I don't mean to beat a dead horse, but I'm completely with you. I wrote down Dallas. And
do you want to throw in some Harden slander before you make your pick?
Yeah, come on. Let's get a Harden. Let's get a Harden average prediction. I'm going to predict your prediction is 4 points per game on 6% shooting.
I'll give him like 9 points per game on 35% shooting. You know, maybe if Harden's feeling himself, maybe he could get to 10 on 40%. Man, if he's really balling. You know, I think you guys make some great points. I think that the key to this series to me is Kawhi wearing out Luka throughout the duration of the series. And yeah, forcing those guys to make shots. But the key thing with Dallas, I think you hit on it, Carson. I really trust this defense. They've been so locked in down this back stretch. I think Luka is going to be the best player in this series. I think he is an unsolvable problem. And then another thing to me, I think Kyrie Irving is the best co-star that Luka has ever had on the stage. And, you know, I know that Jalen Brunson had – a great stretch, during that Western Conference Finals run, even in games where Luka wasn't out there. And so this doesn't mean I don't want to discredit what Brunson did during that run, but he's a different player now. He is just in a different tier of ability now at this stage in his career. This is the best co-star that, Luka has ever had. And with these questions surrounding the Clippers, I just couldn't pick them. Kawhi's health, as we've talked on so much. And then, yeah, I think James Harden is due for another dud in the playoffs. Shocker. What a hot take. So yeah, I think Dallas is just a better team, but I do think this is going to be a really good series. And I wouldn't be surprised if LA somehow pushed this 7, but I think I think the Mavericks are going to.
Yeah, I think I speak for all of us when I say like this frustrates me every single year. Like I remember in the 2022 Western Conference Finals, I was like, man, this is a total coin flip series for me, but I'm going to pick Dallas. And I picked Dallas in 6, if I remember correctly. And then Warriors fans forever were just like, you picked against us, blah blah blah. You didn't believe in us, even though I picked them in every other round that they played in that playoff run. And it's funny because that's the thing. Like, I am picking Dallas. I feel confident that they should be the favorite. I'll actually pull up the numbers on DraftKings to see if they have posted actual series odds for that yet. But like As far as I'm concerned, all of these are more or less toss-ups. Like any matchup that doesn't involve Denver in the Western Conference for me is going to be like I'm picking this team, but like 60-40. And that's the thing. Like I have Dallas as my third best championship contender. You know who's right behind them? The Clippers at 4.
Yeah.
So even though I'm picking Dallas to win this series, like I very much believe in the Clippers as a playoff team. I very much believe in them as a legitimate threat, and I don't want to like kind of write that off if that makes sense. I'm not seeing any odds for the Clippers Mavs series, which is kind of a bummer. They should totally have that up. Maybe I'm just looking in the wrong place. We'll have to look it up later. But anyway, any other thoughts on this series before we get out? Any like random kind of things you're going to be looking out for? Are we going to get like who's more likely to botch this for the Clippers, Westbrook or Harden, like that sort of thing?
It's a good question. I mean, I would say Harden just because of the scale of his role, but Russ obviously could just have like brutal shooting stretches. But I think overall what he does, like pushing the pace with the bench units, and you mentioned obviously his effort in the series against the Suns last year, like defensively, it was really impressive in how he can impact the game with his athleticism. The biggest thing for me that we haven't really touched on is just the stakes of this moment and like the history of this matchup, because these have been two of the best first round series in recent years. And I think this pretty clearly has the potential to be the best because there's just more basketball talent on the floor now with Kyrie out there, even with Harden out there as a third star level guy for the Clippers. Luka's better than he's ever been. And historically, Luka just had like these ridiculous 3-point shooting series against the Clippers where it's like, okay, he's raining 40 to 45% of his step back threes. But that has become closer and closer to the norm for him. Like he's just gotten so much more consistent in terms of his step back and pull up 3-point shooting efficiency. So I kind of think he's going to go nuclear on them again. And he just has done that over the years. So I'm excited to see the rematch and the potential Luka revenge element of it.
I think it's going to be a long series too. Go ahead, Logan.
Oh, yeah.
I think they took this down. I don't know if like too many people were hammering it. It looks like the line opened up at Clippers favored minus 165. The Mavericks were plus 140. Like I said, they took this down. It's not up anymore, but that was what the line was at.
That is surprising to me. I thought Mavs would be a slight favorite. I get that they're on the road, but
I think they're probably holding off, waiting for the Kawhi injury news too. I'm sure they're going to wait until they have a more concrete answer. And I did some digging on it this morning. It sounds like he got an MRI that came back negative. I'm less worried about him being able to play game one and more worried about how good he's going to be when he's playing in game one. All right, guys, that is all we have for today. Before we get out of here, Carson, you want to shout out what you guys are working on over at Nerd Sesh? I saw you did a video on LeBron James. He is eternal.
Did do a video on LeBron. He is eternal. Dug into just sort of the ways that he's adapted his game this year to not just continue to dominate, but even improve from last year. So we are doing content like that and want to ramp that up throughout the playoffs. That's sort of like 10, 12-minute video breakdowns on specific players and topics. But we also, of course, do our full-length shows. We've been 3 times a week during the playoffs. We might even ramp that up. We'll be going live after games as well, but you can always find those full shows on the Nerd Sesh YouTube page, and you can listen across audio platforms. And if you want our trivia content, that's the other big thing we do. That's TikTok and Instagram at Nerd Sesh, Twitter at Nerd_Sesh.
The nerds do great work. Make sure you guys get over to their channel and subscribe and support it. We're also going to be working with them throughout the playoff run, just random shit talking sessions between rounds. You know how it goes. As always, we sincerely appreciate you guys for supporting us. No show tomorrow, but we're gonna Sunday afternoon. I'm going with Colin Cowherd, so that's the next time we'll be breaking down. We'll be doing a little playoff preview. So I will see you guys on Sunday evening. Until then, hope you guys enjoy your weekend.